This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. And welcome back to Food for Thought this week. Robert Forman, who is the author of Enlightenment Ain't What It's Cracked Up to Be, Executive Director of the Forge Institute and Founding Executive Editor of the Journal of Consciousness Studies. And he's acknowledged to be one of America's most respected spiritual teachers. Hello, Robert. How are you today?
I'm doing fabulously well. It's always a joy to talk to you.
Perfect. Now, you've been busy creating since we last spoke, and it's not a book, but it's a new program called Soul Jazz, I hear.
So I have. How did you know?
Now I'm curious.
Yes, we've created this wonderful program. It was actually created not so much by me, but by a team of spiritual teachers and writers and facilitators, and it was a fabulous team that put this thing together. And basically the challenge was, a lot of people are doing spiritual stuff and growing and whatnot in their lives, but still they were having trouble applying the lessons of spirituality and applying the lessons of religion to their lives. And so then the question became, okay, how do you help people do that? How is it that we can bring this stuff into everyday life? So Soul Jazz is our answer to that.
Now, I'm curious as to the title of the program, because I'm wondering if it's going to take people on their own version of a journey of discovery, snow, and jazz in the soul, which is obviously the subheading of your last book.
The word discovery, absolutely. The word jazz in the soul is connected. The Soul Jazz program was already in existence when I came up with that title. So yeah, in many ways, yes. But let's talk about jazz for a second, because I think that's sort of it. What I find is if you can talk to people in a real way, if you can talk to people in a way that's kind of telling the truth about what's going on, making yourself a little vulnerable, really telling the truth. If you can do that, there's something so free about that. It's just, you're just sort of like open up like a flower. And when you do that, if you do it with another person and then they open up back to you, which is the key, if they open up back to you, there's a kind of exchange. And in jazz, the way you do it is you'll play a little riff, and then the other person will hear that riff and they'll go, so you'll go, ba-da-da-da-da-ba-da-da-do, and then they'll go, ba-da-da-da-da-ba-da-da-do, and you'll go, ba-da-da-da-da-ba-do-ba-do, and they'll go, what, ba-do-ba-do, and so there's a kind of exchange that goes back and forth. And when you do that, when you're talking about what's really true, what's really going on for you, there's a kind of jazz-like quality to it. It's almost like you're doing improvisation back and forth, but with real-life stuff. And so soul jazz is designed to get people to be able to really share and really do it in a way that's alive like that.
Because that's a genuine energy that is passing backwards and forwards between the two people playing, then, isn't it?
Yes, there's an energy that goes back and forth. I sometimes think, this might be a little woo-woo, but I sometimes think that really what you're swapping is consciousness. Mm-hmm. In other words, you're swapping a quality of your life. It's really more a feel than it is a thought. That you're exchanging what is true for you and you're exchanging what's true for them. But more than that, you're exchanging a quality of deepening or dropping down or dropping in. That I think that's really where the fun stuff happens.
It's interesting when you talk about the deepening of the thought. So what was the key intention that you set out with when you started writing this program? Was it that deepening of thought and that whole feeling of exchange?
Well, let me back up a notch to tell you about that. I started the Forge Institute in 1998, 1999, that area. And the reason I started it was I had my first few conversations with some folks in which I was really sort of blossoming out during those conversations. I mean, I'm a friendly enough guy and I've had lots of good conversations, but this was categorically different. This was really opening up to another human being and learning in the process. And there's a feel that happens in those things. And the feel is, it's as if the air between you becomes soft. Or it's as if your sort of body is becoming more open, like like a funnel opening outwards. There's a quality of exchange that goes on. And I found that the most joyous thing I've ever done. And I just wanted playmates. I wanted to be able to find people that I could do this with, because it's the most fun thing I can do. I mean, really, it's the most fun thing I do. Maybe with the exception of playing the blues guitar, but almost the most fun thing that I can do. And so we started this institute, and what I found was a lot of people wanted to do exactly that. Everybody recognized how cool that is and how much richer your life becomes when you do it. But I was surprised how little people could actually do it. People wanted to do it. People talked about doing it, but it was as if we couldn't quite bring the magic to bear. So we, this dozen of us or so, who all had these experiences of just chatting with each other in that way, said, well, what does it take to teach somebody how to do this? And thus begins the challenge of figuring out what a program would look like. And it took us probably about 5-6 years of once every 2 or 3 week phone calls, maybe once a month phone calls, to try to figure it out. And we were, I think, quite successful in figuring it out. I think we've really got some very, very cool, very good tools that people can use. So I'm very pleased with it. But it so that's how it kind of came about. And so you asked me what my intention was. My intention, frankly, was I wanted to bring people to a quality of life that I had come to love, which is, let's really talk. Let's really share. Let's share what's really going on for you. Let's share what's really true as a human being. I can think of nothing, and I'll stop my long talk here, but I can think of nothing that's more satisfying than to share what it is to be a human being with other people who also are exploring what it is to be a human being. Don't you know?
That sounds incredibly powerful, to be honest. It does. So give us an overview of what soul jazz is exactly then.
I think what you're asking is like, what would it mean to take a course that's like that? Or you want of like some tricks? It's a 6 2-hour classes done by webinar, to which I hereby officially invite you to join us. I think you would love it.
I would.
So it's 6 classes. In fact, we've got, for this next course, which starts in May, we've got 3 people already from Europe, which is why I'm talking to you, because we've got the time thing worked out. It'll be on Sundays, so we'll meet in New York at noon and 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in England and Europe. We give some talks. And mostly it's people having experiences. We have a wonderful program that allows people to talk to each other 2 by 2, 3 by 3, whatever. They're called breakout rooms. Same as you'd have if you were face to face. So people have the experience, and then we talk about what that was like, and we might do the experience again. We might do something similar to it. It's really very exploratory. It's very much based on people's experience, and we kind of respond to that. Then after the course is over, if people want, there's a real follow-up thing that we can arrange for folks. So it's damn thing is really working, which is really cool. I mean, I've read a lot of programs and they all work sort of. This one's like nailing it. It's like over and over again we're seeing people go, wow, like I can really do this, so that I think I was telling you a little earlier about a woman in Pittsburgh who took the program, and now I've been continuing to work with her afterwards. And honest to goodness, Debbie, it's like watching somebody come to life. It's watching somebody just come so alive in their own life and just be able to. Here's a woman that's been, a little shy and a little afraid to talk about herself, and I've been encouraging her to, and she's been encouraging herself to just kind of come out like like she's been hiding behind a wall, and she's just coming out, and it's gorgeous to watch. It's absolutely so cool. Okay, now stop.
But you talk about, you're talking about this lady who's kind of had this experience, is now coming out. But many of us, and you talk about it on the website, that there are many people have a yearning for a better life, effectively put off living, and you don't really explain about the program in detail. But how does the program help us to become inspired to live the life we want to live and create one that the one of our dreams?
All right.
Or even to realize that we
Yes.
can live a better life.
Yeah. Here, then, a little bit of theory, and it's not controversial. When we grow up, we all develop a kind of way to be in the world. Carl Jung, the psychologist, called it a persona. We kind of learn to live how our society expects us to live. We develop values. We develop habits. Growing up, I was taught to be. I grew up Jewish, though I'm no longer. But we're all taught to. As a Jewish kid, I was taught to be sort of studious, but I also learned to be kind of funny and chipper, and I was sort of like Mr. Ha-ha kind of guy. And that was a persona that I developed, and it was reasonably successful. But in the same time that you're trained to be that, you're also boxed in. You are taught to be only this and not that over there. So that to a considerable extent, the learning to be socialized, the persona that we develop, is a training into a particular thing and out of the rest of life. And I think the challenge of learning to be a free person is learning to live both in the way that you're taught, but also to explore that which is outside that box, and to open up the walls of your box so that you engage with more and more of life. So that what I like to do, the thing I like to do the most, is to talk with others about what I don't yet know, about who I'm not yet but seem to be finding or discovering in myself. So that it's, I think a lot of people, and I can think of a dozen people right off the bat that really like to keep things kind of under control, and I know exactly how to do this. But for me, what I've learned in the last 5-10 years is how much fun it is to explore what you don't yet know about being alive, and who you're not yet, and the sort of impulses that you've kept under wraps, and to start to reveal those. I find that is where you really come to life. Everything else is kind of controlled and contained and boxed in, and to some extent, I mean, you can't see this on the radio, but I'm sort of, I've got my hands around a box. So, it's like, can you kind of peek out of the corners of the box, and can you see through some of it, is really where life becomes alive. And I want to live my life such that there's no boundaries to it, no real walls, and I want to open up. And don't confuse that for, the person that whips their wife because they have no boundaries. That's really not what I'm thinking. Rather, I'm thinking, can I really open up to a new way to think, a new way to be, and discover other ways to be alive?
What about if you don't know what you don't know?
Then that's where it's fun, isn't it? The way it comes up, Debbie, is like this. I'm talking to you. Now, I've done a lot of radio interviews, and I wish I could do this on the radio. To some extent, we're kind of constricted as to what we can do, because the radio audience is we don't know who they are, and so if I was to reveal something very personal about myself, it would be a little awkward on the radio. But nonetheless, I'll tell you a little story, and it's you'll get what I'm pointing to here. I was having a fight with my wife, which is something I have done before and will probably do again. And there was a feeling coming up inside of me about what was really going on. And the feeling had to do with the fact that we'd been apart for about 4 days. She had gone to Phoenix on a business trip. And we were sort of fighting and struggling and whatnot. And at some point I realized, this might have something to do with the fact she was gone. I didn't know what it was. And yet, nevertheless, it was this sort of feeling in there. There was something that wanted to be spoken. And so I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anything about it yet. But I knew there was something kind of, as it were, bubbling in there. And it didn't take me long to realize that at some level, as dumb as this sounds, and these things always sound kind of dumb when you say them, I was kind of pissed off that she'd left. She'd left and got, how dare you go out there and have fun without me kind of thing. Or you left me alone with the dog. And, and once I said that, it was like the whole tone just shifted. And I hadn't known that I had those feelings ever. But that's what it is to discover what you don't yet know. There's a kind of an emerging, there's a kind of, soul is like this. Soul is always kind of, it's always a kind of burbling up. And I find that if I can pay attention to those burbles, is that a word, burbles? If I can pay attention to those burbles, and if I can sort of like really attend to what little feelings are in there and want to be spoken, it's like magic. It's like I've never known this before, and yet there it is, and it often feels that way. So of course we don't know what we don't know. Of course, Donald Rumsfeld never knew what he didn't know, and there was the unknown knowns and the known unknowns. But nevertheless, this is I know there's some unknown in there, but I don't know what it is yet. So this is the non-Donald Rumsfeld version of learning.
Now, one of the 3 areas of the course, and I think these are the areas of the course from the website, taking a stand, engaging others with depth, and becoming man, becoming woman. And is the relationship side of what you're talking about, that experiential side, is that worked through in engaging others with depth?
Oh, I don't understand what you're asking.
Okay. So what I'm asking is, am I right in effectively thinking there's 3 areas for the course, and that's take a stand, engaging others with depth, and becoming man, becoming woman, and the exploration of effectively of relationships is in the engaging others with depth area of the program. Yeah.
Okay, what you're describing is, yes, the program as a whole touches on those 3 and several others, by the way, also how to fight, how to do politics. But seriously, that's a huge one. So that we have different segments. The first one, the 6-week course, that each class lasts for 2 hours, is mostly about how to think about relationships, how to think about moving forward, and whatnot. But all of those aspects that you're pointing to center on the key to moving a relationship forward. And the key to moving a relationship forward is going to the place that you don't yet know out loud, exploring it even though it makes you feel a little anxious or vulnerable to do that. How to deal with that anxiety, how to deal with the feeling of vulnerability, and how to deal with the stuff that comes up that makes us want to sort of hold back from each other and whatnot. And by the way, I feel remiss as a guy that's running this thing. So I'll just say this. This website is called souljazzonline.com. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm done.
Now, you say that taking a stand is an amazing how-to guide to enable people to go from a mere character in their lives to being the author. I love the way you say that, to be honest. Is it effectively rewriting their story, or is it about creating the one going forward?
Well, most of us have a fairly vague idea about what we are, vague idea about what we're about and whatnot. But if you say to yourself, now here I'm thinking of a particular individual, if you say to yourself, I want to be a photographer. Well, what does it mean to be a photographer? Well, you could say to yourself, I want to be a famous photographer. That's something that's not within your control. But being a photographer is within your control. So then if you say to yourself, okay, if I don't define success as being a famous photographer, but rather being a photographer, what would that look like? Okay, what would it look like to be a photographer is I'd take pictures every day. I would buy myself a camera that had blah, blah, blah. I would edit my pictures, develop them if I'm still using that technology, and edit the pictures and learn how to do that well, so that you can kind of map out what it would be to be a photographer. Mm-hmm. And then you can start to say to yourself, am I doing that? Well, yes, I'm doing it here, but I'm not doing it there. What would it take to do that? What's standing in the way of my taking pictures every day? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm afraid. Can you look at that? Can you start to unpack what stands in the way of your doing that, or of your being that kind of person? Like I was telling you before the show came on, I took up the guitar, the electric guitar, when I was 60. I'm now 66, and I practiced it every day. And to some extent, it was because I said, I want to play the guitar. What's that going to take? So that to some extent, and I say to some extent because it's both kind of natural to me, but it also was a matter of choosing. And lo and behold, in the course of 5-6 years, I've actually gotten pretty good, and that's kind of what it takes to be able to do something. So that I had an intention, I took a stand in the sense of I choose to be a musician. What does that look like? I am a musician in that I practice every day and I do this every day. And it has a huge impact. But most of us feel like, oh, I tried that and I couldn't do it, and then, like that. But if you say to yourself, no, really, what's it going to take to do this? And I want to do this, Or better still, where this gets, I want to be a better husband. I want to be a good husband. Or I want to be a good father. All right, what's that look like? How do I do that? That's where this stuff gets really powerful, to be a better person. What does it look like to be a good person? And that's where people, I think, can really profit from this work.
A lot of people get stuck in the fact that they haven't, or they feel they haven't got things right, though, don't they? And therefore create habitual behaviours or patterns around things that they may have tried before. And then, for instance, they've done a course and they've not finished it. So they do another course and they've not finished that one. And then, therefore, they feel that they're never going to actually achieve that.
Right. And the truth be told, in that way, they don't. They won't. Because they're just keeping that pattern going. So what's it going to take? If you look at your life and you say, well, what's in me that I'm getting from continuing that pattern? Okay, so I'm getting the feeling of being a victim. I'm getting the feeling of being defeatist or defeated. All right, that's something I'm getting. Okay, that's what I'm getting, or however you say that. All right, now, do I choose to continue that pattern or not? And to some extent, you can. To a considerable extent, you can make a choice about this stuff. You can say, am I going to continue with that or not? And I choose to not, or I choose to continue it. And it does make you feel like much more the author of your program. So these are wonderful questions, as the last time was as well.
So how do we use the program to move us through what are effectively big challenges that people have around patterns of thinking?
Well, I would say the first thing that you would have to say, and let's go back to the Soul Jazz program that we're offering. We're offering one, by the way, starting the 1st of May, and it's on souljazz.com. Souljazzonline.com. And I think the key element is that we come on this stuff with a fairly realistic picture of what we're about. That is, I have been living my life for 60 years or 66 years, not treating my spouse well, for example. Not 65 years, I've been married for 40-ish. All right, so that's an old pattern. Mm-hmm. So what can I say to myself? I can say to myself, there's a side of my life that I've never really been able to get to. I want to open up that side of my life. But in doing that, in opening up a very new way to see myself and to be and to interact and to open up myself to these other sides of my life, that I think that if I say to myself, I want to make progress, not I'm going to be perfect. Or my friend, this student of ours that was wanting to be a photographer, part of his difficulty was to say, I'm not a great photographer, I'm not a perfect photographer, I'm not going to be 100% at this. And I want to say, look, you set out to do 100%, and if you do 80%, you've gotten a long way. Well, that's a huge accomplishment to be able to move your life in that way. I think the only thing that gets us down is this sort of self-criticism that comes from, I can't do all this right. I can't. I can't be good enough at this. I can't meet my standards, which are pretty high.
I find that really interesting. I learned something really important for myself a few years ago from Nigel Bottle, who's kind of a serial entrepreneur, and he just said how he just put out what, the business ideas that he was doing, and it didn't have to be 100%. He would actually just progress through it and get it right out on the hoof in many respects. Mm-hmm. And he's done extremely well. And watching people like that and realising that actually he has one focus on what success is for him, but he is achieving it with his approach, which actually it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right. And if you start with the attitude, like coming back to this, the principle of opening your life up, it is not the case that as I open my life up outside of my box, that I'm going to be 100% open, like going from a drop of water all of a sudden being an ocean. But I can say that I can go from being a drop of water to opening up a little bit today and becoming a little rivulet, and then from there becoming maybe a stream. It's like you can make this grow and grow and grow. So if your attitude is, let's keep on the journey, let's keep discovering and opening up to places you haven't been before, or the question that you brought up before, which is like, what if you don't know what you don't know? If your attitude is, I want to keep exploring what I don't yet know, that's cool. That's where this stuff really takes off. So, yeah, wonderful.
And that's in some respects having a sense of adventure within your own life as well, though, isn't it?
I rarely use a word like that. Yeah, I think that's right. That the whole thing does become more of an adventure. Yeah, the adventure of I mean, if I was to push that a little bit, I'd say it's the adventure of becoming human. Interesting. The adventure of becoming real. Yeah. I mean, we all start out being kind of unreal in a certain way. When I was a kid, it was all that sort of like chipper, kind of goofy side of life. And it's not that it wasn't real, but there wasn't a whole lot of reality in it. And yet, as I've recognized the sadder sides of my life, the sides of my life that have been suffering, the sides of my life that have been successful, that you start to open up to a whole range of what it is to be human, that I think is really where the challenge is, don't you?
Now, on the website, it explains how you've set up the system of support for those who want to weave more soulfulness into their everyday lives and relationships. Mm-hmm. But what exactly is soulfulness?
First of all, when we first started all this, I used to think that soul was a kind of thing. It's like you have a soul. It's like a ball in the middle of your belly kind of thing. It's like, that's my ball, that's my soul. And I've come to think that soulfulness is more like a verb than a noun. It's more like a process than a thing. So that to be soulful, well, let me back up one notch. You said to me about 2 minutes ago, it's like an adventure, right? Yeah. And I said, I've never thought about it like that. And then where that made me go was, I think it's sort of like the adventure of being alive in many ways. And that was a kind of discovering in that moment for me. I was discovering what it is to be in this journey. And to be on the journey like that has been sort of the key of my life. But I'd never thought about it as an adventure in quite that way. So that to do that, to open up what I am to something I haven't yet known or recognized, is to sort of have one little moment of becoming larger, of discovering a little about what my life is about. And that process is to engage the soul, is to engage with you and to discover aloud between the two of us, as if there's a space between the two of us, to discover aloud more of what it is to be you and to be me. And so soul happens as that to use your word, soul happens as that adventure, as that expanding of what you know, and more and more you become bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's to engage with this verb, which is the process of soul. If we were to put it in these terms, I would say that that soul is that quality in us that is always emerging. We're emerging into yet bigger. We're emerging into yet more. And that quality of emergence is what is to be soulful. It's not to say, I have this thing, like I am compassionate and that is my soul. Rather, it's I'm compassionate and I'm not compassionate in this way. I am a good person here in this way, and over there I'm not so good yet. It's all of this. It's to discover what it is to be you and to be a human being. Yeah. I love your questions, by the way. Just very good.
I'm curious about the vulnerability side of that. I know you talk about vulnerability, and you actually say it offers a way to re-envision and practice being vulnerable as a gateway to authenticity. But
beautiful.
They're your words, not mine.
That's why they're so good.
I know. But doesn't vulnerability create a level of stress? And so that adventure and that soulfulness can lead to the vulnerability, but couldn't that not fundamentally close people down as well if they're feeling stressed in that vulnerable state?
It could, and so you don't want to do this in a way that's really going to endanger you. For example, my son, when he was about 14, 15 years old, told a friend of his that he really had a crush on such and such a girl. And the very next day it was all over the school. So that he had exposed himself, he had made himself vulnerable, he had told a real truth to this friend of his, and the friend misused it. I mean, radically misused it, and my son was hurt. I mean, really hurt by that. And he was embarrassed, and the girl wouldn't talk to him, and I mean, it was like hard for him. If you are exposing yourself in that way, in other words, kind of willy-nilly, that would be very dangerous. On the other hand, any act of love, any act of truth-telling, makes you to some extent vulnerable. That's part of the deal. That to open up what you are to another human being is to take a risk that it can be received poorly, that it can be misused. And so you want to pick your playmates well. You want to be very thoughtful and careful about how to pick playmates. On the other hand, you also have to, I was going to say you have to recognize that's, you don't have to do anything. But, I have to own up to the fact that if I want to be truly open with another person, part of the deal is I'm going to be a little anxious about doing that. I'm going to be making myself vulnerable. And I want to look at that vulnerability and face into that anxiety in such a way that I recognize, I'm anxious, and I'm going to kind of lean into it, or I'm going to go through it, because past that shadow of fear is love, is openness, is contact. And I think that that's a choice that people have to make fairly consciously. I recognize this is vulnerability, and I'm putting myself at a little risk here, and fingers crossed, but I'm going to do this anyway. So, but that's a good question. Does it make you stressed? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's part of the deal, isn't it? Yeah.
And your program is about helping people create relationships of truth-telling.
Yeah.
Which I just think is lovely. And, you say it's where they discover who they really are and who they really are together. So that creates the intimacy. And I love the way you say it's delicious at the end of that.
Yeah, and intimacy is delicious. I don't know anything. I mean, I think I told you earlier on, but I had some of these conversations, and they're like conversations I'd never had before, and they were so delicious and so rich and so velvety almost. And I think that we talk about coming more alive, and that's what that's like. To come more alive with somebody is to be able to share with somebody like this is to share what is real. So you're both learning who you are, what's new, but you're also getting to do it with another person. And it's like, I don't know quite why, but it's like a gift that we've been given. And the gift is that if you can really tell the truth to another person, and they hear it well, which most people do, frankly, then you gather a friend. You gather real contact. You create intimacy. And that intimacy is itself a gift. And that encourages us to discover yet more. Like, I'm thinking now of a friend of mine. She lives out in Seattle. We have a wonderful, very dear friendship. Never been sexual, not even close. I just love this woman dearly. And she'll call me up and say, I don't know what I think about blah, blah, blah. Can you listen to me for a bit? And she called me up about 2-3 weeks ago exactly this way. And I said, yeah, what's up? And she started talking about this particular friend that she had. There was something going on and she didn't know what it was. But to have somebody like me that wasn't going to judge her and wasn't going to say you're being a jerk and wasn't going to sort of lay anything on her, but just wanted to hear it and wanted to share it. She learned what she thought. I learned what she thought. I learned what I thought about things. And we sort of reinforce that sense of, here's somebody you can really trust. Here's somebody that this is a worthwhile person to share your life with. And honestly, I don't know anything more fun. I don't know anything better to do than to do exactly that. You know what I mean?
And you're talking about it, how important it is to choose your playmates, right? And that's effectively what you're saying there, isn't it?
Yeah. Because playmates allow you. Remember, we talked about this as jazz. In other words, there's a kind of free form flowing back and forth. As she shared with me what she was thinking about her friend, I wasn't talking back very much. But Debbie, I can tell you, I definitely learned about my own relationships and what it is to be a friend and what it is to be trustworthy, and why she was struggling and why I tend to struggle in certain ways. It was, even though I didn't talk much about my own friendships, I learned a ton about that. And I know she at the end of the whole thing, she said, "Oh, this is what I get it. Here's where I'm kind of stuck." And so she was really able to articulate where she had kind of moved forward. And I think that's exactly the kind of thing the Soul Jazz website, which is souljazzonline.com, is trying to get us to do. It's like, this is exactly what we're about. We're trying to make contact with people in just this way, so that we both learn what our own lives are about and create that sense of intimacy and contact. And fabulous.
And I believe some of our, I believe our relationships are where some of our biggest learning comes from. Yeah.
I used to think it was from books.
I still have a pretty big library and a lot on my Kindle, I have to say.
Yeah, well, I'm an old college professor. I did that for many, many years, and I must say I'm learning a hell of a lot faster when I just talk to people about what's real. Absolutely, totally learn faster. I mean, there's certain kind of stuff. It's more impressive to be able to say, I was a professor of Hinduism and Buddhism. It's more impressive to be able to say very cool words like Pratitya Samutpada. That sounds so cool, doesn't it? But to be able to know what it is to be a human being, now there is something worth knowing.
So in many respects, is it helping people to explore the intimacy with themselves, never mind the intimacy within a relationship?
Yeah, I think so, and I've been thinking a lot about that recently, actually, that it's a funny phrase that we're in relationship with ourselves or we have intimacy with ourselves. But if you go back to that image of growing up in a kind of box, I grew up thinking I was a particular kind of being. So that it's all the impulses that I've been discovering over the years about, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this too. All of those impulses that I know, to some extent, I'm sort of learning what it is to be this particular being, me, and learning what it is. So it's an odd phrase, but I feel like I can say in very good conscience, I'm becoming more intimate with me. I'm having a relationship that is richer with me. I'm more comfortable knowing that I have impulses that I'm not real conscious of. I'm more comfortable knowing some of those impulses that I have, so that it is part of the process of becoming alive. is to create more and more knowledge or more intimacy with who you are. And that the sense that we talked before about soul being this kind of emerging quality, if you sort of get on here I'm thinking of being on a river in a canoe. When you're in a canoe on the river, you can kind of turn your canoe funny and turn it over in the other direction, or you can go with the flow. And the more you can go with the flowing of the river, frankly, the more effortless it becomes to canoe, and the more effortless you just sort of go and go and go. And I think there's a kind of getting into that flowing quality that as you become more intimate with yourself, you have less and less struggle going, and that's what I feel. And that's who I am. Yeah.
So the Soul Jazz program effectively is giving people the tools that they need to achieve that for themselves.
And as I said before, and it's actually working, yeah, which is really cool. I mean, I honest to goodness, it's so gratifying. I see people taking this program and they go, wow, you mean I can do that? I can talk that way, and I can be this kind of person? Wow. And it's like really cool to see. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm dating myself by using the word cool as much as I do. It's really awesome.
I think you get to a certain point when actually anything you do after the age of 40 is ever going to be cool ever again.
There you go.
To those who are younger. It's just one of those acceptances.
Yeah, seriously.
Now, in your book, you talk about how important it is to actually have the right people around you who effectively help you sustain the flow in your life and allow the inventiveness to happen. Who did you work with on the program, and what's the expertise that they brought in particular to help you create the program that you have done?
Well, there's one guy I want to sort of, what do you say? Give a shout out to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that phrase in England? Shout out? I'm going to shout out to so-and-so?
We do indeed, yeah.
Fine, then we'll shout out. His name is Kerry Gordon, actually, and he's in Canada. So he's sort of halfway between England and the United States. He is a psychotherapist. And I think the thing about this guy was that he brought this very sharp understanding of the sort of emergent quality of soul that I've been talking about, that soul is this sort of discovery process. So that was one fellow. There was another fellow named Doug Kruschke who is in California, and he is a group facilitator. He's a very good corporate facilitator, and so that some of the tools that we've used to develop as we do the program and we think about facilitating this and that, we've sort of learned from him. Then there was a guy named Michael Schwartz, who's down in Augusta, who's been very instrumental in sort of organizing the thing and getting us to think about the whole and the steps to it. So that was good. Melissa West is out in Seattle, and she is she's done a lot of facilitating, so she really brought a lot of that. But she's got this very wonderfully sensitive soul, and there's that word again. And she was very quick to sort of help us sense the difference between males and female energy and how that works, and help us understand when we're getting too heady, and so that it's really been a creative effort. There's one guy that's a minister, UU minister, no, Christ, United Church of Christ, UCC minister. He's out in California, and he helped us get a kind of Christianized language to the thing. So it's really been a cooperative effort. It's been very much. But again, the key of all of that is to be able to listen to one another and to be able to hear each other well, and to hear each other without sort of imposing your own expectations on the whole conversation, and being able to listen to each other with real open-mindedness. And so, yeah, thanks for asking. There's a wonderful gang of people, yeah.
So those were your playmates.
Yeah, and let's come back to that thought. I want only one thing from people that I hang out with. And what I want is somebody that can listen without judgment, that can talk in a way that's really sensitive to their own new stuff and discovering new stuff as they're going. They can be pretty straight with me. And I say pretty straight quite intentionally, because I realize none of us can be 100% straight. We don't know all the impulses that are at work at any one time. because to be able to talk like that, it is so much more live and so much richer and so much freer. So yeah, these are my playmates. These are the people from whom I've learned how to do this. These are the people I want to do it with some more. And wonderfully enough, I consider all of them still friends. All of them. So it's a real privilege for me. And this is one of the richest sides of my own life, is to be able to say, yeah, I got these people. Oh, there's another fellow, too, I want to mention, that you brought up this business about taking a stand. There's a wonderful, very thoughtful man out in Los Angeles named Tom Feldman, from whom we learned the phrase taking a stand, and he really has sort of developed that. So again, each piece of this has kind of come on. There's a woman named Mary Ellen Tron down in Atlanta that's she's the one that really has kind of refined the business about male-female energies, and yeah, so isn't that the way this stuff is supposed to work? That you really do listen to one another, and people bring real chunks of this. So it's been a real joy, and it's been my privilege to be able to run it. But I sure as hell didn't make it all up.
So it's an online program. How do people find out more about it? Where do they go?
Oh, what a wonderful question! Thank you for asking. Again, the website is called souljazzonline.com. And the program is, we're going to crank up another one the first weekend of May the 4th or 5th, whatever that Sunday is. And people can see stuff about it on the website, souljazzonline.com. Just sign up is very easy. One thing that we're doing, since we're still in beta test mode for this, and we'll be probably through the end of the summer, is if somebody signs up for this, they're only paying what we figure will be about half price. But if they sign up for this and they want their money back at the end of the whole thing, it costs $150 US. If they want their money back at the end of the whole thing, we'll be happy to refund their money, no questions asked, as long as they finish the program, because we want the feedback. And that's been sort of reassuring for people. So yeah. So
brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. Yes, it's brilliant.
Well, it's kind of a cast iron guarantee. It works either way, doesn't it?
That's right. Well, yeah, it does. And nicely enough, there's been we've run this program twice. Each course of about 8 to 10 people, there was one person that wanted their money back, both of whom were broke, and so both of whom said, I really need the money, and I was happy to refund it. But people are very pleased with it, and the people are, very few people are saying this wasn't worth it. Even the people that wanted their money back said it was worth it. They just wanted the money back.
Okay. Well, Robert, this has been an absolutely lovely interview, as it was previously. Thank you so much for coming on Food for Thought.
Well, let me say again, as I said last time, that I know how hard it is to keep a program like this going, and how hard it is to have really rich and thoughtful conversations with people. And you're one of the people I most want to talk to. And you do such a good job of this, and you really bring such both joy and thoughtfulness to it, that I want to remind your listeners what a gift they have in you. And I want to thank you for doing what you do. I think it's just, as you might say, brilliant.
Thank you so much.